Yeah, I think that it's important to remember as we do approach this 80th anniversary that the record of the United Nations over these 8 decades has been one of extraordinary achievements. Just imagine, whatever the difficulties have been, what the world would look like if the United Nations had not existed, had not been able to do what it has done. And so the point I'm trying to make here is that delivering on the founding principles of the United Nations Charter, and you've mentioned them, securing peace and security, promoting development, protecting human rights, providing humanitarian aid. This has always been a difficult job. And perhaps today, the circumstances we're working in look more difficult than it's ever been in the history of the UN. But I think the reality is we've always had to contend with problems, contend with obstacles, and we've always found a way through. So I think the challenge today on this 80th anniversary is to continue with this record, not only of achievements, but of adapting to new realities, a world which is being transformed by many factors. Some are political, some are technological, some are more economic. The United Nations needs to move with these changing times to reflect the world as it is today, not just the world as it was in 1945. And I think we're approaching our 80th anniversary very much in that spirit of modernization and improvement.
Now, the United Nations is also trying to strengthen global cooperation, as you point out, at a time when we see rising geopolitical tensions around the world. I mean, how do you build, or rebuild, I should say, trust between member states, especially at a time when, as we see, consensus is very hard to find?
Well, yes, consensus is quite difficult to find in many regards, and I'm afraid we've seen that very often. For example, in the UN Security Council, perhaps the most visible part of the United Nations in the public mind, the Security Council hasn't always been able to react together to respond to very important crises in the world. So we do need to rebuild this very intangible commodity, trust. And how do we do it? Well, not all of the answer lies, of course, in the United Nations. A lot lies in the field of bilateral relationships, things that happen elsewhere. But I think there are two things that the United Nations can focus upon as we do try to, as you said, rebuild trust levels to levels which allow us to function effectively. One is we have to focus on results. People, I think, will believe in multilateralism, international cooperation, if it shows that it can produce the results that people want. If we're able to prevent and bring an end to conflict, if we're able to stimulate development that improves people's living standards, if we're able to get humanitarian aid to people who need it and protect their human rights. So we need to double down on the results that we generate in the United Nations. And the UN80 initiative, combined with the Pact of the Future that we adopted last year, can help us do all of that. But the second thing which I think the United Nations can do to build trust is in the field of dialogue. I think trust is generated, it's certainly my experience, trust is generated when people meet sincerely, listen to each other, and try to find common ground. When people stop talking to each other, stop listening to each other, then I think trust can very rapidly dissolve. And here is the United Nations' incomparable comparative advantage. We are the place where, by definition, the world comes together, even when they don't necessarily agree, to talk through difficult issues, to search for solutions. It can be a frustrating process, it can be a slow process, but it's an absolutely necessary process, because when you do sit together, when you do talk to each other, and when you make that genuine effort to find common ground, that in and of itself is a process that builds trust back. And that's what really the United Nations is all about.
Now, as you pointed out, we live in changing times, rapidly changing times, and One of the challenges we hear about, especially from developing countries, is that they are not given enough of a voice in global governance, that they are underrepresented, and that there is a need for reform of the global governance system. China, in fact, has come forward. It's come up with the Global Governance Initiative. We last heard about that at the Shanghai Cooperation Organization conference in Tianjin. How can those all work together to reform the system?
Yes, I think it is very frequently recognized by developing countries, but by others as well, that the governance systems we have in place in the world are unequal. They do not give sufficient space and voice to the developing and emerging countries of the world. And when the Secretary General was in Tianjin at the beginning of September, he welcomed the new governance initiative that China has launched as a way of addressing these issues. The United Nations and the Secretary General have also been vocal in calling for reform, for example, in the international financial institutions, where very clearly the developing countries who have an overriding interest in the way that those institutions operate, those developing countries do not have sufficient voice and influence in decision making. And we need to bring that same reflection back home to the United Nations. Regrettably, our governance systems too, I think of the Security Council in particular, really respond, or correspond, I should say, to the world of 1945, not to the world as it is 80 years later. So this imperative, and I think imperative is the right word, to produce more equitable, more fair governance systems. It's also a key to rebuilding the trust that we talked about a little bit earlier in our conversation. So we take governance reform very seriously. We welcome China's efforts in this regard, and we look forward to progress being generated by all of these efforts.